Hi, everybody. Welcome to another segment of Right from the Author. I'm Joe Cochran, joined by Jeff Hansen. Jeff, welcome again.
Thanks, Joe.
We've had a couple great shows so far this year. Tonight, we will talk about the John Norman Collins, or should we say John Norman Chapman murders from about 40 years ago. Convicted of only one murder, though. Serving time at Marquette, Michigan. Your thoughts real quick on that case. We're going to have Catherine Ramsland from Pennsylvania on here shortly, who's written about John Norman Collins.
Also known as the co-ed killers.
Yes.
In Ann Arbor, Michigan, back in 1970, I believe.
Late 60s.
60s.
Convicted in 70.
70.
Yeah.
Yes. It was, I guess, I mean, it's one of those cases that this man, obviously, you know, sociopath. Finally, law enforcement helped catch him by, I guess, one of his family members helped turn him in. It was a state police officer, I believe.
Yeah, it was uncle of his, I believe, or some kind of relation.
That's something, yeah.
DNA back then, Jeff, different than what we see today? Is there, you know,
definitely
more updated?
Correct. There's, I mean, back then there was, it was just probably in its infancy. Our guests will probably be able to help us a little bit more with that background with knowing about DNA. But it's something that probably, if in today's standards, if you were to find some kind of, or the evidence if it was still there to match to the killer, it's always best to have DNA evidence. It's always a plus to have that.
I'm glad you went there about our guest. We will have Catherine Ramsland, who wrote on this and has got Devil's Dozen out now, and I think 33 or 34 books now. We'll talk to her. She'll correct me or let me know if I was right on that. And then, of course, Sarah Weck, who is a regular here, can get in on this DNA with the great work he does. He's done thousands of autopsies and has written many books on them. So we will talk about them. I want to let everybody know that we did try to contact John Norman Collins. I did try to at the prison 3 times. They told me to get back, and the personnel I needed to speak to was not available, and so I couldn't get the call through to him. But I understand a lot of these that he doesn't take up on. Does that surprise you at all?
No, not surprising at all. People like that, I mean, he's trying to, obviously, if one day he's trying to say he's innocent, or, you know, people like that believe they are innocent. They believe that, you know, sociopaths obviously believe that they did not commit the crime, even though everything points to them doing it, and, you know, it's one of those cases.
Some of, and you and I were talking this before we came on air, can tell a lie long enough, then they actually
start believing.
They
believe their own lies. They say it so much, and they have it in their head that for so long that they actually believe their own lies. They become.
You've had to seen this before somewhere in your work.
Yes, I have. I've seen it, and just in the instance that the stuff I'm working on right now is, it's very interesting to see how people for several years will say the same thing over and over again, and they will stick to the same story. Case in point, you have several people like Charles O'Brien from the Hoffa mystery, and you have Donovan Wells, the man that caused the horse farm to be dug up in Milford.
Yeah, exactly.
Several years, he kept to the same story. He believes in his mind that he saw something that day, and turns out, no, he didn't. So.
Okay. From the Taylor Police Department, and also author of Warpath, and working on one of the top 5 unsolved crimes of all time that hopefully later this fall that he'll have done. And we have Jeff here usually week in and week out. So, but we will get with Catherine Ramsland right now. Catherine, finally, welcome to TV Warren's coverage of Right from the Author.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. I really enjoyed our talk yesterday. We had quite a long discussion about this, and I did bring up the one part where he had changed his name from John Norman Collins to Chapman. I did go to Wikipedia, and also Jeff here, my co-host from the Taylor Police Department, also had read this, that it did come up about David Mark Chapman, but that's the only place I've seen it. Is this something, maybe a rumor just spreads? Obviously, his mother's name changed to Chapman. Is that why he went with that?
Well, that's what, certainly my opinion. I think it was a rumor that spread, but I wouldn't use Wikipedia as a reliable source for really anything.
No, I was just checking every angle after we had talked, and I think you're right. This has nothing to do with David Mark Chapman.
No, he wanted to change his name so that he could try to get transferred to Canada without anyone noticing who it was. Yeah. It was a very practical purpose.
Talk about him trying to get to Canada, and what kind of a long shot is this, Catherine?
Since I don't live in Michigan anymore, it's hard for me to say, but I doubt that it'll happen unless things something changes in the political regime and they just decide it's too expensive to keep a prisoner for life. I mean, it's really quite expensive year by year, and if they think, it might pay off, he's maybe 75 years old and no longer really considered a danger, I think, that's still a possibility.
We go back, and I'll have Jeff get in here in a minute. Actually, it was somebody you knew or a neighbor that actually discovered one of the bodies. Is that true?
Yeah, the first body in this particular series was
Yes.
discovered on the farm of friends of ours.
Do you think, Catherine, that they really just went after him with the Karen Sue Bynum murder in July there because maybe they didn't have enough evidence for all that and they didn't want to lose this case, or and it was just airtight, or why do you think that he was never convicted on the other 5 and they never went after him on the other 5? Do you think that maybe he did not commit those other 5?
No, I think that certainly the evidence was strongest in the Karen Sue Bynum case, and once the conviction was there, why did they really need to do anything else? But also there was an attitude of if he's good for one, he's good for them all. I mean, that's not uncommon in an investigation of this nature, but we're talking about the late 1960s before anyone was even using the term serial killer. There were no FBI resources for it. There was no profiling unit, nothing like that. There was hardly any sophisticated crime analysis going on. And I think because the community response was so strong and so frightened, it was very similar to what was going on in Boston in the early 60s, where they just felt pressured to close these cases. So the approach was, if we make an arrest in one, that's as good as making an arrest in all of them. And they didn't have the kind of evidence in the other cases that they had in the Bynum case.
There was no such thing as DNA back then, correct?
Correct, no DNA. And even processing crime scenes wasn't as careful. Often they didn't use gloves.
Right.
And also there were a lot of jurisdictions getting involved and bumping up against each other. There was really a lot of politics in this case.
Well, you had county officials, probably state or local, going after the same case, and then
first you had local, and when they weren't producing, actually had several counties, and then you had the state got in the act, and then the FBI did actually come into it in sort of a peripheral way, not the behavioral sciences unit, because that wasn't even thought of at the time, but there were people who were questioned by the FBI. But still, no one really quite knew how to manage this operation, and there was a lot of pressure from the community, to the point where the citizens banded together and brought in this nightclub psychic, Peter Herkos, because they just thought the police weren't doing a good job.
Well, they were also trying to. I mean, at that time frame, that would have been the same time frame as the LaBianca murders, also known as Sharon Tate murder, and isn't it the same time frame?
That happened
a year or two later.
That was when he was arrested. When Collins was arrested.
Right.
Was when Woodstock. It was very, very close to the
Charles Manson case.
But the investigation did not overlap with the Manson case.
Okay.
No, he was convicted in August of '70. Catherine, we have your good friend and mine, Sarah Weck, joining us tonight. Sarah, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi. It's a pleasure to be with you guys, and of course with my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Catherine Ramsden. Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, Sarah.
Good to have you both on. I believe from the same state of Pennsylvania.
That's right.
The great state of Pennsylvania, home of the world champion Phillies. Cyril, your thoughts on this case? I don't know how much you've been able to digest of this and how far you go back on this case. Is this pretty much open and shut? And do you think, if he is guilty of the first one, that he possibly committed some of the other 5?